Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. For anyone that's new, my name's Claire and this is Yoli. And I started this channel to bring you weekly plant videos. In this video, as well as going through some of the really common houseplant problems and helping you solve them, I will also be announcing the winner of our giveaway competition. So make sure you watch to the end of the video to find out if you've won. Thank you so much to all of you that sent in photos for this video. I really appreciate it. And hopefully this will help to fix the issues you've got going on with your plants. An important thing to say is if you're having ongoing issues with a plant, make sure you quarantine it away from the rest of your plants. Because if it turns out to be a fungal disease or pests or something that can spread, the last thing you want to do is let it bring down all of your houseplants. I've got a weird rash that's just started to come up on my face. Great timing. So the first problem I'm going to be looking at is brown leaf tips. The tip of the leaf is usually the bit that your plant can essentially afford to sacrifice in order to keep its energy focused on the main areas. So it's usually an early sign when something isn't right. Browning leaf tips are super common and they can happen for a variety of reasons that I am going to go through. Whatever the reason, I would always recommend chopping the brown bits. They're dead and they won't be magically springing back to life anytime soon. You don't need to chop the whole leaf off. I usually just cut around them, just following the natural shape of the leaf. Getting rid of them means that your plant can focus its energy on the healthy growth and not on the parts that are not savable. This way also you'll know that if the brown tips keep coming back, then something still isn't quite right. So the first reason that brown leaf tips can occur is that your plant isn't getting as much humidity as it needs. I've said this before in a previous video, but just think about how our skin's affected if we're in an environment with really low humidity over a long period. It feels tight and dry and just not good. The exact same thing happens to your tropical humidity-loving plants. Their leaves will begin to dry out, turn brown, and eventually crack. It'll usually start at the tip or the edges, and if the environment doesn't adapt, then it can slowly start to make its way down and cover the whole leaf. And that will be a dead leaf. So yes, crank up the humidity for starters. I tend to have my humidifier set to about 65% at least, and I will always turn it up when I've got the radiators on, because central heating drains so much humidity from the air. If you don't know the humidity of your home, or if you don't have a humidifier, then there are a few things you can do yourself to naturally raise the humidity. You can hang wet clothing over radiators so that the moisture evaporates into the air. You can leave cups of boiling water close to your plants. And grouping plants together also really helps to raise the humidity levels for them. A lot of people think that misting your plants is a replacement for having a humidifier, and it's really not. Yes, misting will slightly raise the humidity levels because the water has to evaporate, but unless you're going to be misting your plants all the time, it's probably not going to be enough to bring the humidity up to the level your plants need permanently. But if you've got the time, then mist away. Misting your plants has loads of other benefits, like helping to keep the leaves clean and minimize the risk of pests. But as I say, if you're doing it purely to add humidity, you will need to be doing a lot of misting. Wow, I just said misting a lot. Now it sounds really weird. Another cause for brown tips on the leaves is a fertiliser imbalance. This basically means that your plant's either getting fed way too much or not enough. Brown tips can be a sign that your plant isn't receiving enough nutrients from the soil, but more often than not, it's caused by an overload of nutrients. It's caused a build-up of salts in the soil and is sending your plant into shock. This is also known as fertiliser burn. If you never or hardly ever fertilise, then I would just try introducing some natural fertiliser and seeing if that helps. However, if you're already fertilising on a regular basis, I would just recommend cutting down for a while and seeing how your plant responds to this. Another thing that can cause this build-up of salts in the soil is actually tap water, especially if it's been treated. I've said this before, but if you have a water softener, don't use this water to water your plants. It's super high in sodium and over time can cause really serious issues. If you want to give your soil a bit of a rinse through, a bit of a flush out, then I would recommend taking either lukewarm filtered water or rainwater and thoroughly drenching the soil through until water pours out the bottom of the pot. This just helps to clear any salt or mineral buildup and allows the roots of your plant to absorb the water and nutrients they need more effectively. Don't do this if your plant isn't ready to be watered yet, or you could end up overwatering. I'll usually do this every few months during the summer season when I'm fertilising a lot, and only when I can see my plants are ready for a water. Whenever you do this, just make sure you leave your plant to properly drain before you put it back into its pretty pot, as otherwise this could lead to further issues such as root rot. Water-wise, something else that can lead to brown tips is irregular watering. It obviously depends on the type of plant, but if you've got a plant that likes to be watered once a week and you're watering it every week, then every 3 weeks, then every few days, it's likely to throw your plant into a state of shock. Irregular watering doesn't mean that you need to really strictly plan your watering routine down to a T. It means watering your plants when they need to be and not just when you feel like it. As I've said before, it's important to listen to what your plant needs and respond to that instead of just guessing. For example, Dracaena plants are really prone to brown tips, and they also really like their soil to dry out slightly between waterings. So if I was to water mine today and then throw some more water on it in a few days' time without checking the soil, the plant wouldn't be ready to process that next lot of water, so it would probably start showing signs of stress, one of them being brown tips. If you trim back the brown, increase the humidity, reevaluate your watering and fertilising, and this is still happening, then I would seriously advise checking the roots of your plants. These are often the root cause, pardon the pun, of issues with your foliage. Healthy looking roots should be full and pale, so if they're dark or shriveled or sludgy, then chances are you have got root rot. This generally happens when you've overdone the watering at some point and your plant hasn't been able to properly drain. Root rot can be a killer if it's left too long, but if you catch it early and treat it, then chances are your plant will bounce back. I will post in the description below about ways that you can treat root rot. Brown leaf tips can also be combined with yellowing leaves, which leads me on to my next point. The second really common problem in houseplants is yellowing leaves. There are quite a few potential causes of this, so if the answer doesn't immediately jump out at you here, I'd really suggest using a process of elimination to get to the bottom of this. Trial and error until you find what works. If you're only getting the occasional yellow leaf, then it's important to remember that sometimes that is just nature taking its course. Sometimes your plant will naturally drop older leaves in order to make way for new growth, and it's just part of the life cycle and nothing to worry about. But if it's happening a lot and new growth seems stunted, then it's definitely something to look at. Again, once a leaf turns yellow, there is really no saving it. Your plant has already decided to let this one go, so I would recommend chopping it. Or at least chopping away the yellow area so that your plant can focus on the healthy growth. There's no point trying to save a leaf that's doomed. The first and probably most common cause of leaves turning yellow is an imbalance with your watering. As I said earlier, it's really important to water your plant when it needs to be watered and not just when you feel like doing it, or when the internet tells you should be watering. Each watering guideline is just that, a guideline, and can change so much depending on the conditions of your home. Some types of plant like their soil to be kept consistently moist, others like their soil to dry out slightly between waterings. Some types of plant like their soil to completely dry out and can go weeks on end without watering. But just research your plant and get an idea of what it likes and doesn't like before guessing. If you don't do this and just randomly water now and again, then you should definitely expect to see some yellow leaves. As an example, alocasia plants like their soil to remain evenly moist and can turn yellow if they dry out even slightly, whereas monsteras generally like the top layer of their soil to dry out between waterings. So if you water a monstera at the same rate as an alocasia, you will probably get some yellowing leaves, and vice versa. If you can see that there's an issue but you're not quite sure if you're underwatering or overwatering, then I would suggest checking the roots first. So many people just assume that if the leaves are turning yellow, then your plant needs more water. But sometimes this can actually be the worst thing you can do if you don't actually know what's going on. Really carefully, just lift your plant out of its plastic nursery pot and have a look at the roots. If they're pale and healthy looking, then chances are you are just underdoing the watering and it's craving a big drink. Or your plant's just letting go of a few leaves to make way for new growth, which is totally normal. But if the roots are shriveled, dark or slimy, then chances are you've overdone the watering and caused the roots to start rotting. If you think your plant has root rot, you do need to treat this pretty quickly as it can be the death of plants. As I said before, I'll post in the description below about ways you can treat root rot. Whilst you're checking the roots, just note how the soil feels down towards the bottom of the pot. If the top half is super dry and the bottom half is really soggy, then you should perhaps think about changing your soil to something that's going to be slightly better draining. There are loads of things such as grit, core, perlite, things that you can add that will just help the aeration in the soil stay really high whilst also providing good drainage. I've spoken before about soil mixes that I like to use, so I will link them above. Another reason for leaves turning yellow is lack of light. If your plant isn't getting enough light to photosynthesize and support all of its foliage, then it will start to get rid of some leaves in order to try and survive. As I said before with the watering, make sure you research the lighting conditions that your specific plant likes before just putting it anywhere in your house. One plant might love direct sunlight and another one can only survive in indirect or low light conditions. Swap those plants around and both could end up having a total meltdown. Conditions that are right for one could be torture to another. If you notice yellow leaves appearing on the side of your plant that receives less natural light, then chances are it's craving more lighting on that side. A really easy way to fix this is just by turning your plant on a regular basis, just so that it can absorb even amounts of light from all angles. If you live somewhere that doesn't get a lot of natural light and you've got a lot of highlight tropical plants that aren't particularly happy, then I'd personally advise investing in some grow lights. I'm planning to do a video specifically about grow lights soon, but on the whole, if you get LEDs, they're really, really cheap to run. Another really important thing you should be doing regularly is dusting your plant's leaves. A buildup of dust not only prevents your plant from absorbing natural light, but it also increases your risk of pests. And believe me, they can be a lot worse than a few yellow leaves. I always try to dust my plants more or less every time I water. And whenever I think of it, just go around with a damp cloth or a damp sponge and just give both sides of the leaves a really good wipe over. Similarly to the browning tips, another reason your plant could be turning yellow is because it's simply not getting enough nutrients. If you never add fertiliser to the water or your plant hasn't been repotted in a while, then chances are it's used up all the nutrients in the soil and is really craving some more. Some plants can go years without being repotted and be absolutely fine, whereas others, particularly fast growers, need to be repotted up to every 8 months or so. Again, you can usually tell when a plant's ready for repotting by checking the roots. If they're pushed up against the side of the nursery pot and look like they're trying to break free, then they probably are. If the yellowing doesn't seem to be affecting the veins of the leaf, then it could just be that it's not getting enough nutrients. I'd advise investing in a gentle, natural fertiliser, I'll link the one that I use down below, and slowly introducing that to your plant care routine during growing season. During the winter months, when your plants aren't growing at the same rate, you can use things such as leftover water from pasta, rice, boiled vegetables, eggs. Obviously wait for it to cool down first. But this can just give them a little boost without giving them a full-on concentrated vitamin hit from fertiliser that they might not need at that time. Again, if you're currently fertilising a lot and your plant really isn't happy, then I'd advise cutting back for a bit and seeing if this helps. It could simply be getting too many nutrients to handle. Something else that's also the common cause of yellowing leaves and is really simple to fix is that your plant is in a drafty area. So many houseplants, particularly tropical ones, absolutely hate cold drafts and just tend to make a bit of a protest by dropping their leaves. People often confuse drafts and airflow. Just because your plants enjoy good air circulation, that doesn't mean that they enjoy a cold breeze constantly blowing on them. Good airflow simply means that an area is receiving fresh, non-recycled air. For example, if you're keeping your plant in one room in controlled conditions, opening the windows for a few minutes or doors will just allow the room to fill with new air and mean that your plants can essentially breathe better. This doesn't mean leaving your plant next to a drafty window or air vent, as it will definitely not do them any favours. There's always a chance that yellowing leaves can be caused by either pests or some sort of virus it's contracted. I'm going to talk about this more in detail as we go on, so keep watching. Another really common problem that can happen with houseplants is that these spots can appear on the leaves. Ow, 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 ow. Hi. Oh. They'll generally start as a circle of brown and then become surrounded by a kind of yellow ring as time goes on, almost like what's going on here that I really need to deal with. Again, there's a couple of reasons that this can happen, but the most common is that there's a fungal disease of some sort in your plants. If you look at the affected leaf in front of a bright light and the area around it looks transparent, this is essentially a dead tissue area and means that it is most likely fungal. If its conditions and watering schedule haven't changed recently and you notice this start to happen, then the first thing you should do is isolate it away from any other plants to stop it spreading. I'd always recommend starting by removing the affected leaves and binning them. Bin them, don't compost them, just because then you run the risk of it spreading to other plants. Lift your plant carefully out of its nursery pot and just have a good look at the roots and anything else that might not look quite right. Other signs of a fungal infection could be mold growing on or in the soil or up the stems and sometimes even on the leaves. If the roots look sludgy, shriveled, or just dark, then chances are it could just be down to root rot. Again, I'll comment below about ways you can fix this. But even if the roots are looking pale and healthy, the first thing I'd recommend, just to be on the safe side, is repotting your plant. If you're not quite sure how to repot a plant, I do have a blog on my website all about it, so I will link that below as well. You're going to want to get rid of as much of the old soil as possible. Again, bin this, don't compost it. When this has happened to me, I try to rinse as much of the old soil off the roots as possible, just so that no potential infection is carried into the new soil with my plant. After you've repotted your plant and trimmed away any affected leaves, you're going to want to treat the remaining leaves and stem. There are a few ways to do this, and you can actually buy ready-made fungicide treatments. But a really easy way to do it yourself at home is just by combining a teaspoonful of baking soda with about 250 ml of water and a few drops of neem oil. Baking soda is naturally antifungal, and I've always found it to be really effective. You can mix in some antifungal or insecticidal soap as well, if you've got some, just to help it stick to the leaves. Before you use your treatment, just take a damp cloth or sponge and just use it to wipe down both sides of the leaves really thoroughly to remove any residue. I'd recommend covering your soil while you do this, just in case any spores from the plant attach themselves to the new soil, because then you'd be back to square one. Another reason to cover the soil is that it's just not great to have baking soda in your soil, as it can actually slow down the growth of your plant. Once you've thoroughly wiped down the leaves, use a spray bottle to spray your fungicide mix all over your plant. Top of the leaves, bottom of the leaves, and stems. It's important to say that any plant that's been treated with neem oil should be kept out of direct sunlight for a while, because otherwise its leaves can essentially fry. Then just monitor your plant, keep it isolated for another few weeks, and retreat it with your fungicide spray if you need to. If you keep doing this and it doesn't seem to be working, there is a small chance that it could be a form of leaf burn, where your plant's received either too much direct sun or it's been placed too close to a grow light. But usually if it's not a fungal infection, it will almost definitely be down to a watering or fertilising imbalance. I spoke about that a lot in my previous point, so if you skipped over that bit, rewind and rewatch. The next super common houseplant problem is curling leaves, which can often be accompanied with drooping and browning. This one tends to be slightly easier to see where the issues are and is usually totally fixable. Normally, a plant's leaves will start to curl if it's craving a really good drink. When a plant's thirsty, its leaves will curl and its stems will drop simply because it isn't hydrated enough to stand upright. As I've said before, make sure you research how damp or how dry your type of plant likes its soil to be before you rewater. And always water as a response to that and not just when you think you should. If somebody tells me that aloe vera likes to be watered once a week, but when I come to water it in a week's time, the soil is still really soggy, watering it again is probably the worst possible thing that I could do. Although curling leaves is generally associated with underwatering, it can also happen when your plant's not able to absorb the water that it needs. And this comes down to the condition of the roots. If you've overwatered your plant in the past and caused root rot, or if there's a salt build-up in the soil, meaning that your plants aren't able to drink normally, then this can also cause the leaves to curl. Carefully lift your plant out of its plastic nursery pot and just have a really good look at the roots. As I've mentioned already, healthy roots should be pale, full, healthy looking, and unhealthy roots will be dark, shriveled, sludgy, rotten looking, basically. If you think that your plant might have root rot, then this is something that you do need to deal with immediately in order to give it the best chance of survival. I will comment below the ways that you can go about treating this. Some other reasons your leaves could be curling are temperature and light. Some plants really don't cope well in high light conditions. Calatheas, for example, would probably have an absolute meltdown if you put them right in a south-facing window. Too much heat and too much light will make your plant's leaves curl, and that's them essentially trying to protect their foliage. So if this sounds like it could be the case, I would recommend moving your plants to a more indirect lighting spot, or turning the heating down and the humidity up. Another common cause for curling leaves is, unfortunately, pests. Again, if you catch them early, they tend to be fairly easy to treat, but they're an absolute pain, and it will also mean that you have to keep that plant, along with any others that's been around, isolated for a while. As I mentioned in my previous point, there are loads of things you can do yourself at home to treat pests and infections. I'm definitely going to make a more specific video about houseplant pest treatments and tailor it to each individual type of pest, not each individual pest. But a basic DIY solution is combining neem oil with garlic and water and spraying this all over your plants after you have given them a thorough wipe over and clean. I will usually just blast a clove of garlic in the blender with about 250 ml of water, 3 to 4 drops of neem oil, and pop it in a spray bottle. You can treat your plants with insecticidal soap as well if you have it. But the garlic and neem oil method is one that I've used on spider mites and thrips over the years, and it's been really effective. Just remember, any plant that's been treated with neem oil should be kept out of direct sunlight for a while, because otherwise its leaves could start to cook. If any of you are struggling with pests right now, then let me know in the comments below, and be sure to stay tuned because, as I say, I have got a video coming soon on this. This one's more aesthetic, but leggy or leaning growth is also a really common houseplant thing, and on the whole usually really easy to fix. Most plants chase the light, meaning that if they're in one position for a long period of time, their leaves will actually turn and start to grow towards that light. You tend to notice this most with your fast-growing plants, such as devil's ivy or monsteras. The solution is pretty simple. Make sure that you're rotating your plant on a regular basis so that it can absorb natural light from all angles. Plants also chase the light when they're not getting enough of it, and that's when they can start to look a bit stretched or leggy. So perhaps consider moving your plant closer to a natural light source, as well as dusting and wiping its leaves regularly. Some plants become lopsided as they get bigger, especially vine plants, if their stems can't provide enough support to properly hold their weight. If this is the case, it's a really good idea to give your plants something to climb up, such as a moss pole or stake, so that they can continue to grow healthily and not risk falling over and snapping. I put a post out this week asking to see any kind of abnormalities that you had going on with your plants. Quite a lot of the photos I received have featured in this video already, but I'm quickly going to take a look at a few that haven't, and don't fall into any of the categories that I've spoken about already. I had almost 200 pictures to go through, so I'm not going to be able to talk about all of them today. But if you find this useful and want me to make a video specifically about your plant problems, then let me know in the comments below. So in this first one, you can see a lot of red spotting on the new leaf. This is something called edema, and it basically happens when your plant absorbs too much water too quickly. The redness that you can see is where the cells have essentially gone into overload and burst. This can happen on lots of plants, but it is particularly common on fiddle leaf figs and often shows up on the new growth. I've also spoken about this in another video, so I will link that above. But these red spots usually go away by themselves as the leaf matures. It's just a little sign that you can probably ease up on the watering for a while. If you do overwater your fiddle leaf fig, you should probably check its roots to be on the safe side, just because they are really susceptible to root rot. So this one again is really common and is often mistaken for spontaneous variegation, if only. But it's actually something called mosaic disease. I've actually seen people selling plants with mosaic disease for hundreds of pounds and convincing people that they're getting a really special variegated plant. But this is definitely not the case, and something you have to be really wary of. Mosaic disease is caused by microscopic parasites that can affect so many houseplants and spreads through contact. Either your plant touching other plants or you touching that plant and then touching another one and passing it on. It gets deep into the cells of your plant and affects your plant's ability to grow healthily. This one's mosaic pattern is very light green, but it can also come in white, yellow, or very dark green as well. The sad thing is there's actually no known cure for mosaic disease. I've had it before and actually do still have a plant that suffers from this. I decided I was going to try loads of things and try and cure it, but so far, no luck. If you do discover a plant that's got mosaic disease, you need to just make sure it is well away from your other plants and wash your hands after touching it so that you don't spread it about. I've put mine up high in a hanger and, touch wood, it is still growing fairly healthily for now. But if I ever find a way to cure it, I will 100% let you know. If you choose to get rid of that plant, just make sure that you bin it and don't compost it, just to make sure that it doesn't spread to other plants. In this next one, you can see that the leaves have become quite flat and stretched. This is really common, and if it's not accompanied by other issues, it usually happens when your plant isn't receiving enough light. This also happens a lot with succulents. They'll flatten their leaves and stretch upwards like this. Your plants flatten their leaves like this to basically try and create a bigger surface area to absorb the light from. Different types of plants enjoy different lighting conditions, so make sure to do your research. But a common misconception when people hear low light plants, they think that they can put it in a room that has basically no natural light. All plants need at least some natural light to survive. This one actually looks really pretty, but it's definitely a sign that something isn't quite right. There are quite a few reasons why this could be happening, but in this case, I'm pretty sure it's because it's not getting enough nutrients. The person who posted this photo also then posted another one of the roots coming out of the bottom of the pot, which suggests that the plant has used up most of the nutrients from its soil and is ready for more in a bigger space. Fertilising can obviously help, but if the roots aren't all contained in the soil and are trying to break free, then they won't all actually be able to absorb the nutrients you're giving them. Another reason white spots can appear on the leaves is a fungal infection. I spoke about this earlier in the video and the ways that you can go about treating it, but if you do suspect it's fungal, the most important thing is to isolate that plant straight away and keep a very close eye on any others that have been around it. Another really common problem that you can see here is new leaves unfurling looking dry or damaged in some way. Again, there's quite a few reasons why this can happen. So if you're not quite sure which might be the case for you, then I would advise using a very careful process of elimination until you get to the bottom of it. The first reason is inconsistent watering. If your plant isn't being watered when it needs to be, then it will essentially pump all of its energy into the main body and forget about the new growth, meaning that it can be really badly affected. So just make sure you research your specific plant's watering needs and don't just water it when you feel like it. If your plant isn't getting enough nutrients, then this is another main factor that can affect new growth. Your plant might need repotting or simply some fertiliser just to give it a bit of a boost. New growth can also be compromised if the humidity and temperature aren't right. Most plants hate cold drafts, so even if the actual temperature of the room's okay, just make sure it's away from a drafty spot. Sometimes this issue can also be caused by pests on your plant. Doing a regular pest check is really important with all of your plants. And if you do notice anything suspicious, then make sure you isolate your plant well away from others while you treat it. Again, I spoke about this earlier in the video. If you've got issues going on with your plants that I haven't talked about in this video, then feel free to comment them down below and I will make sure to cover them at some point soon. Also, if you found any other tips or tricks that work really well for combating houseplant problems, then let me know as well. If you found this video useful, please make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more weekly plant videos. Also, make sure you're following us on social media, Instagram @The Jungle Haven, Facebook, The Jungle Haven. If you haven't entered our giveaway competition, then that's the end of the video. But if you have entered, keep watching and I'm going to draw the winner. Hello everyone, and welcome to the bit of the video where I'm gonna draw our giveaway competition winner. Firstly, thank you so much to all of you that got involved with the giveaway. I have never done a YouTube giveaway before, ever, and I was just really nervous that no one was gonna enter and this part of the video would be quite awkward for me, but you have entered, so thank you. What I've done is I've put all of your names in here that entered just on YouTube, and then those of you that also shared it on social media, your names are in here. So if you shared it an extra once, then your name's in here an extra once. If you shared it twice, your name is in here twice. I feel like you can see where I'm going with this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pour all of them in to the main basket. And then I'm going to close the lid. And also, I was going to say, some of you said that you wish this had been a worldwide competition. I think I'm probably going to do one of those next, so stay tuned for that. But for now, I'm going to give this a really, really, really good shake. And I'm going to pull out the winner. So, drum roll, please. The winner is Danielle Jarvis. Yeah! Congratulations, Danielle. You have won the giveaway competition. Yay. As I say, please don't be disheartened if you didn't win this one. I love a good competition and I will be doing more of them. The reason I'm waffling now is because I didn't think about how I was going to end this. Thank you for everyone that got involved. I hope you will have a lovely evening and stay tuned for more competitions and weekly plant videos.